This video is brought to you by Skillshare. So a couple of years ago, I made a character design video called Turning Flowers into Fairies or something along those lines. I was extremely art blocked that week, and your girl absolutely miffed it. I was hard on those designs in that video, and I go back and watch it, and I am even harder on them now. Listen, if there's one thing that I've learned in like 15 years of being an artist, it's that sometimes you just gotta put the pencil down because it's not working for you in a particular day or week. And let me tell you, friends, I'm actually having one of those weeks again. I've been doing a lot of studies and that sort of thing to improve, you know, the art skills. And whenever I try to draw from imagination right now, I pick up my pencil and my brain is like, what do you expect me to do with this? And I'm like, girl, your job? So I thought, what better a week, what better an opportunity to return to a prompt that I struggled a lot with in the past and didn't like than a similar week where I'm similarly art blocked and like can't draw. The thing is, in essence, this should be a really, really fun prompt. Flowers are beautiful. There's lots of opportunities for color theory and shape language. And I think one of the reasons why I struggle with this particular thing is that I put a lot of pressure on myself to make it the best that I can because I know that there's potential there. Do y'all get me? So hear me out. I once again have too many prompts on my list today. These are too many characters to try to be doing in one video. It's a Kira special. So the flowers that I'm going to attempt to work with today are the ghost orchid, the bird of paradise, wisteria, and fuchsia, the flower. Not the color. So, inspo boards for this week. We have a fun little twist because I haven't built any yet. Future Kira is gonna have to figure that out. Sometimes whenever I make these videos, I like to do a lot of planning. There ends up being lore. This week, I'm truly just in the mood for a mess around. I have some very vague ideas of the directions that I would like to go in for these characters, particularly, and I'll show some images on screen so that you can get my drift. I want to go in kind of like a fairy fused with high elf situation, something that's a little bit more flowy and elegant, something that's a little bit less rooted in my typical like fairy tale brand of fantasy and something that's more high fantasy. You get me? I don't even know if I get me. So my general idea for these characters is, because of course we've established this is a weird connected universe that I keep adding on to and making characters that I will probably never use again. So I thought it would be really fun to design kind of like a fairy council where everyone's really arrogant and pretentious and sort of annoying, but like in a hot way, you know what I mean? I don't know. We're just going to, like a small ball of dirt and hay out in the desert, see where the wind takes me today. So let's start out as always with a couple of thumbnails. As I've been doing a lot lately with my character design videos, I started out by just messing around with some doodles in my sketchbook, specifically focusing on faces and the shape language going into the face because I feel like it's a really good way for me to start nailing down character. I've really been trying to break away from some of my same face syndrome tendencies lately and explore different ways to design different characters and people in general. So for my particular process, focusing on the face of a character as a first step not only helps me to differentiate characters within a group I'm designing, but also helps me to really narrow in on shape language specific to that character in a very focused area like the face, and then expand it out into the entire body as I focus a little bit more on silhouette. So once I was done messing around with silhouette and facial sketches, I moved on to breaking down some photos of the actual flowers themselves. This is something else that I've been doing lately just to get a better hold on shapes and the color palette and brainstorm some different things that I can do thematically with the character. This is also where I take vague characteristics of the prompt and try to translate them into personality traits and idiosyncrasies that I can form into an actual human character. For example, with the ghost orchid character, the overall shape is very kind of flowy and elegant, but there's a certain rigidity to the shape itself. It seems like a very controlled elegance and beauty. So those are elements that I ended up putting into the personality of the character design. And then finally, after all that, I got to the actual colored thumbnail designs. These are here, of course, to specify the silhouette a little bit more and then start nailing down color palettes for the characters and try to actually make them readable and clear. And I also like to take this time to make all of the characters look good together as a group. I think I vaguely achieved that here, but this was a particularly hard group of characters to develop. No surprises there. In fact, I was having such a difficult time trying to flesh these out that I actually cut the 5th character from the group. So one of the silhouettes that you see here will not actually make it into this video, but
but you know, maybe next time.
So as we've discussed, I'm having a little bit of art block this week, which usually means that I'm entering a period of artistic growth. I can tell that the way that I'm stylizing faces and bodies is leaning more towards realism so that I can focus a little bit more on capturing likeness and expression. So this week I have been revisiting Gabriel Piccolo's Skillshare class, character illustration, drawing faces, figures, and clothing. I think that I've taken this class about 2 times before, but each time I've gone in with a bit of a different focus. This time I'm focusing on how Gabriel stylizes body types and faces in a more detailed comic book inspired style that I'm leaning towards in my work these days. He's really great at explaining how to simplify facial details into concise, readable shapes, and I'm beginning to think a lot more about how to stylize subtle details of someone's likeness whenever I'm drawing from reference or from imagination. And Skillshare, as the world's largest online learning community, has thousands of similar classes taught by industry professionals in countless topics like illustration, painting, film and video, sculpting, and countless more. If you're not sure where to begin on your learning journey, Skillshare has curated class lists called learning paths that are hand-picked classes meant to be taken in order that build upon previous classes to reinforce your lessons, and they're available in a range of difficulties from beginner to more experienced, and include topics like design, productivity, creative freelancing, programs like Procreate and Blender, marketing, and many, many more. So recently I have been checking out the Build Your Foundation and Figure Drawing learning path because I, in fact, did not go to art school, so drawing from reference instead of from imagination is actually a relatively new skill for me, and spending more time on that neglected side of my art has been helping to improve the structure of my drawing tremendously. So if you want to try out some classes and grow your skills, you can do so for free, because the first 500 people to use my link in the description will get a free 1-month trial of Skillshare. Thank you so much as always to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to it.
So first up, in keeping with my tradition of doing the character that I struggled with the most first, we have the Ghost Orchid, and you know, all of the problems are just laid out there. You all know designing masculine characters is not my strong suit, and drawing masculine characters that are also a little bit beautiful and pretty boy, definitely not my strong suit, but I'm trying to push myself a little bit here, so bear with me. So deciding on some kind of story premise or setting for these characters was for some reason very, very difficult this week, so whenever I was going in and actually working on all of the character designs and really doing the painting and the art for them, I was kind of head empty, no thoughts, focusing mostly on design from a purely shape and color standpoint, you know, based on the breakdowns that I did, and the actual characterization did not inform these characters nearly as much as it should have, nearly as much as it usually does. But you know, that's the beauty of art/writer's block. Sometimes you try really hard and it just doesn't turn out the way you want it to. But at the time of recording this, I do have some vague ideas fizzing around the brain, so I'm going to at least like tell you guys the prompt that I wish I had explored more, if that makes sense. So originally, whenever I went into this video, I was going to make these characters part of some kind of powerful fairy council, kind of politically corrupt and shady, but at the time of doing the art and the exploration, I just really wasn't in the headspace to design villains, and as it stands, like, the designs that I ultimately came up with don't really read as villain designs, so that's not ultimately the direction that I want to go in. I know some of you guys are crying, you didn't get your problematic faves this week, and I apologize for that, but there's always time later on. Instead, the concepts that I wanted to go with for these characters are a very like professorial, instructor, collegiate kind of vibe. They maybe teach at some kind of Ivy League fairy school that focuses on the magics, but these guys are the department chairs for like the academic classes, or at least some of them. Not all, because I didn't design enough characters in this video. This idea kind of came from the fact that in this weird fantasy shared universe that I have, I've designed other Guardian of the Forest type characters, fairies or witches or knights, and these characters would have to obtain their knowledge and schooling from somewhere. So for example, this would probably tie in with the flower knights that I designed last year, all of the moth witch type characters that I've designed designed, I think all of them would have attended this school or be associated with it in some way. And I'll dive a little further into that as we progress in the video. So I decided the characters in this video would be department chairs of Science and Astrology Magics, Botany and Herbology, Art and Illusionary Magics, and Physical Magics Education. So of course, the first character that I'm designing here is the head of Science and Astrology Magics, and he's really a rather uptight, logic-based character. He's very strict, he's very reserved, and he's a bit of a skeptic whenever it comes to other magical practices. He's very much like a magic is a scientific reaction of chemicals and exchange of energy type person. And I like to think that in this particular universe there is some kind of scientific basis for how the magic system works. Not that I've thought about that, but because of that he doesn't find some of the softer magic systems and practitioners to be all that legitimate, which causes tension within this academic environment because he's on the board and he'll try to like defund other magic programs that are a little bit more artistic or based in something a little less tangible from his perspective. So depending on whether you're one of the students that he likes and gets along with or one of the students that struggles in his classes or, you know, vice versa for the faculty around him, he can either be kind of a rational, pragmatic figure that's pushing the school forward or a bit of an antagonist in the setting. And I think one of the ways that whole conflict would surface in this era of the story is I think this character would actually be my Luna Mothwitch character's brother, like older brother. And since she's a practitioner of a much softer kind of earth-based magic system, there would be a lot of conflict and tension there. I think it would be cool if that Luna Mothwitch was actually formerly a fairy and she like traded her wings in exchange for the magics that she uses, and there's like a lot of drama with that decision because she, quote, abandoned her family and heritage in exchange for power, and he like doesn't approve of that at all. Anyways, it's getting very off topic, but I think it would be a fun idea to play with. So in terms of design, I really wanted that controlled, polished elegance to come through in his styling and silhouette. I also wanted the motif of a star to really come through, given that he has like some kind of a relation to astronomy or astrology in terms of his teaching. The star shape of the main petals of a ghost orchid are a huge part of what I think makes the flower cool, but then it also has those little tendrils that come down and have sort of a curly appearance. So I tried to keep that contrast between kind of a sharper star shape and wispy shapes consistent throughout his design. I wanted to find the middle ground between like a well-tailored suit, something that would be appropriate for a professorial position, and flowier, more graceful garments. So I kind of settled on this suit jacket with long coattails and capelet combo. There was a ton of inspiration on my Pinterest boards that had this sort of like fantasy-based military aesthetic. I feel like it's kind of popular on the runway right now. Link to my Pinterest boards, as always, will be in the description if you want a closer look at those. And I feel like this aesthetic overall not only would be kind of, you know, it would fit into the light academia aesthetic, but it also has a lot in common with collegiate regalia that you would see at some kind of graduation ceremony or something like that. I feel like it's a slightly dressed down version of that you could theoretically see a fancy professor wearing day to day. To go along with his fancy threads, I also gave him super oversized wings that are in the shape of the ghost orchid's petals, and I also gave him some little curly tendrils coming off the wings. There is not a practical reason for this, I just thought that it looked cool. To come up with a reason right off the top of my head, I would maybe think of them as deer antlers. Whenever a fairy is quite old and experienced, maybe they just grow super big flowy tendrils that kind of show their rank within a clan. Something like that. I think that's fun. For a further peek under the hood, whenever I was working on these characters, I did at one point mess around with the idea of shaping the wings of all of the characters off of the pollinators for each of the plants, which I think is a super cool idea, but something that I did not have enough time to research and execute. But feel free to steal the idea if you would like. I'll probably explore that a little bit more in the future in a week when I have a little bit more time. Getting back on topic, to match the little curly tendrils, I of course gave him super long, voluminous, curly hair. I was going to just do straight hair at first, but the shape length language just wasn't gelling as much in my mind, and in the end, curly hair made a lot more sense for the design. I focused a lot of the visual busyness for this design up near his face because I feel like his face is very strict and intimidating and also simultaneously beautiful, and one of the things that makes it like that is his ridiculous eyebrows. I don't know what's going on there, but this was one of the main things that I thought of whenever I first started developing this design, and it just stuck all the way through. I think it's just a fairy thing. Sometimes when you're a fairy, you have absolutely wild, intimidating eyebrows, and to go along with his crazy eyebrows, I also gave him a ridiculous tendril-looking collar with a little necktie that resembles the center of the flower, and to go along with that, a little star-shaped brooch that maybe represents his standing in the astrological community or maybe within his clan. And then at the very end, which I don't know if it's gonna line up with the voiceover, whenever I knew a little bit more about this character, I also went in and gave him tiny little rude professor glasses because I feel like that's just a must with this archetype, and I really love how that looks with like the white 90s bangs. And something else that came through with this character, because the reference photo I used had some dew on it, I kind of incorporated a water theme into it, almost like knowledge dripping from one generation of instructors onto the new generation or some kind of thing like that. So I also wanted to include some little glass beads in this design, so I added a bunch of little bright rhinestone looking beads to the eyebrow area and also to certain areas around the collar, and also onto a staff, which I also added just, you know, because I feel like a staff adds to the fanciness of any character, but also because I feel like this character would definitely do that annoying thing where they just like slap their little stick onto the chalkboard for emphasis to make sure everyone's paying attention and also to instill fear. Anyways, that was a lot of rambling, but despite all of the numerous struggles that I had working on this piece, which you could probably see during the drawing section, I think I arrived to a fun place with this character's design, so I will leave you with this. I think the name of this character would be Professor Spectre because the flower is called a ghost orchid, and I like silly character names. Next up we have Wisteria, which is one of my favorite flowers slash plants. I think that they are so pretty, which obviously means that I put a ton of pressure on myself whenever I was working on this character design. So my idea for this character is that she would be kind of a biology-based department chair with a speciality in botany and herbology. So she is very much a nature-obsessed, plant-loving type, but with a little bit more of a scientific edge to it. I kind of see her standing within the political dynamics of the school as being a little bit neutral because nature and biology kind of exist at this meeting point between artistry and pure science, and I feel like that's how she feels about magic as a whole. So I feel like her respect for both sides of this like magic discourse make her a bit of a diplomatic character. And I also feel like the waterfall influence on her design that I kind of took from the flowy, drapey nature of the wisteria plant makes her a very go-with-the-flow character, and she kind of doesn't meddle too much in the agenda within the school, and instead will flow more into the direction that the student body wants to go in. I think that would give her a really fun dynamic with Spectre in particular, because I think he would try to always be influencing her towards the more scientific direction, and you know, especially whenever like the school board needs to vote on things, try to sort of steer her in that direction. And she'll humor him and hear him over because of course she does have a large respect for the magical sciences, but in the end she's like, no, we're here to represent the interests of the student body and the direction they want their education to go in, blah blah blah. There's just something to me about taking a magical setting and just bombarding it with red tape and bureaucracy that is very funny to me. So of course all of the nonsense political dynamics that exist in our world that prevent any actual progress from happening definitely still exist in fairy society. Not even magic can solve that. For other personality traits, Wisteria is definitely the kind of person to like go off on long-winded personal stories in her class time, but then somehow relate it to some greater plant-based metaphor. She's constantly monologuing about the miracle of nature and breaking things down on a molecular level, and her students kind of have to constantly remind her to stay on track and like refocus onto the actual lesson. I think sometimes she would actually be getting off track and derail the entire lesson, but I think other times she would somehow miraculously loop it back into the overarching lesson of the day, and all of a sudden you've learned something and you didn't even realize you've learned something. I had a bio professor like this in college, so that's where some of this inspiration comes from. I think her classes would focus kind of halfway on the scientific basis of botany and herbology, and the other half would kind of focus on the more magical basis, like stimulating plant growth and maybe potions or something like that. I wanted to give each of these characters some kind of magical ability that would give them a distinct teaching advantage in their field. So given that Wisteria the plant often represents longevity or immortality, I think her magical power would be some kind of plant healing ability or plant growth stimulating ability. This would also be a nice tie-in for all of the plant and insect-based witch characters that I've done in the past, because they would definitely need to take this class to learn all they need to learn for their plant witchery. And if you're wondering, okay, so all these characters have an ability, what was Ghost Orchid's ability? I think that's kind of the point. One of the things that the Ghost Orchid represents is a general air of mystery and transcendence. So I think it would be cool if the other teachers and professors don't actually know what Spectre's ability even is, and some of them don't even think that he has one, but I feel like he definitely has one, and I think the ability would be something along the lines of influence or some kind of hypnosis, like some kind of very subtle mind control. Pardon my pop culture reference, but I feel like it would almost function like a Jedi mind trick where it doesn't work on everyone and it doesn't work all the time, but whenever you can find an opening for that influence in a particular person and sort of manipulate their mind, it does work to influence them in your direction. So very dangerous ability for someone in his position. Getting back to Wisteria, because this is her voiceover, I wanted to give her a very organic, plant-dominant silhouette and outfit because, like, of course, she's the nature mom. She's gonna be all about even, like, wearing nature. So tying the idea of waterfalls in with the way the wisteria plant grows itself, I thought it would be cool if she kind of had a simple base outfit that's sort of like purple, like a cute purple tunic-style dress with maybe some flowy sleeves, just like a real nice fantasy-based outfit, and then she would add on and accessorize that by literally growing branches and vines and wisteria plants all over the outside of the outfit in kind of like a cascading waterfall shape. I thought it would tie in with her character really well if most of what she wore was just organic plant matter itself, and then the finer details of her outfit would tie into that, like little lace shorts and boots that have more of a wisteria shape to the eyelet lace, and then wispy transparent panels on the sleeves and dress itself. I paired all of this with a flowy hairstyle kind of inspired by bubble braids, and particularly this image, and of course gave her a huge flower crown because this girl is definitely going to accessorize further with nature. Similar to Spectre's design, I added a bunch of water droplet inspired beads into the look as well, and since this character is pretty powerful and I feel like she might come from a noble fairy family, I gave her 2 sets of giant fairy wings partially inspired by a dragonfly's wings and partially inspired by that reflective pattern that appeals on the top of a pool, just to play further into that water theme. And with that, Wisteria's design is done. I absolutely love her. I think she's my favorite design out of the group, and no surprises there. Pretty fairy women are very fun to draw. Next up, we have the fuchsia plant, which definitely has some kind of more specific scientific name to nail down the exact kind of plant that I'm basing this on, which I'm going to ignore for the sake of convenience in this video. So given the inviting pink and purple color palette and the symbolism within the actual flower representing love and trust, I want to make this character the department chair of art and illusionary magics, which is exactly what it sounds like. This character is in charge of both visual arts at this school and is also in charge of illusionary arts, which can be used both for combat and for pure artistic expression. This magical theory is also based in a much softer, more subjective magic system, which means it's in direct opposition to Ghost Orchid's magical philosophy. So obviously, conflict ensues. But I would imagine that this character is actually very meek and soft-spoken and shy. She's very much a head-in-the-clouds artistic type, so she's very emotionally driven and very empathetic to others. So I think she would have a very kill-them-with-kindness approach to dealing with conflict at the school, which is something that I think Spectre would also find to be absolutely infuriating. He can't deal with that at all. And I think she would also take the wind out of the sails of the scientific departments by basing a lot of her arguments in philosophy and subjectivity. And whenever it comes to issues of the mind and emotion and magic that's based in that, she'll get so philosophical and esoteric that in the end they don't even know what she's talking about, and she's really diffused any arguments by that point. So in terms of her particular ability, since she's in charge of illusionary magics, I think they would be based in some kind of psychic influence or mind control. So her illusionary creations would kind of manipulate what the subject sees in order to translate some kind of artistic idea, and she would also teach other people within the school to do that, either for combat or, like I said, for some kind of artistic expression. Not to expose myself too much here, but we're talking like if genjutsu from Naruto was used in some kind of weird artistic way, you know what I mean? So as someone who has a calm disposition and is also a lover of the illusionary arts, I think she would also be a lover of the leaf and the other psychedelic-inducing edibles that this universe may provide. So obviously, she would also be really good friends with Wisteria, and they would definitely hang out and smoke some leaf on the weekends. Fuchsia is truly just your cool, experimental, weed-loving art teacher. In terms of design, since there is so much going on with the fuchsia flower, I really wanted to say fashion with her visual appearance. She is a lover of the avant-garde runway fashions, and she definitely overdresses for class. The shape language of the actual fuchsia flower and plant is pretty round for the most part, but then if you start bringing in the actual leaves, it's sort of all over the place. So even though this character is mostly soft, rounded shapes, very approachable, I did want to throw just a couple of weird pointed edges in there just so that you get the impression that this character's a little wacky and very expressive. For the main outfit, I gave her a dress that very much follows the silhouette of the actual flower. It's a little off-the-shoulder romper dress with giant purple petals around the skirt that echo the shape of the actual flower, with of course little bike shorts underneath so that she can still be very active and appropriate for work. She's got big poofy multi-tiered puff sleeves that kind of follow the shape of some of the petals. She's got some dangly little tendrils that look like the stamen of the flower coming off the back of the skirt. And I paired that main outfit with a headpiece that also looks like the shape of the flower with petals and leaves coming off of it. Once again, I feel like elaborate headpieces would be a big part of fairy fashion in this universe. So I also decorated the headpiece with some unrelated white flowers to add a little bit of contrast, and I added a ton of dangling beads and jewels to once again echo that iconic dangling shape of the stamen from the actual flower. I kept the wings for this design pretty soft and basic. I didn't want to go too over the top because there was so much happening in the actual clothing, so I once again just based them on the purple petals from the flower but added a little bit more texture to them. I don't think this character would come from any like esteemed or noble family, so I didn't feel the need to make the shape of the wings too over the top for that reason as well. As an art teacher, I feel like she would be very relatable and down to earth, so instead of having fancy wings, all of the information about her physical appearance would come through in choices she made from her clothing, and also through her accessories, because to end the illustration, I replaced the vague magical balls she was holding with art materials instead, because I feel like that was a lot more fitting for her character. Last up, we have the Bird of Paradise, which is another character that I was really looking forward to designing and working on, and also another character that I struggled with in a really weird and unexpected way, and I still don't know if I'm completely satisfied with the design, but hey, you guys can be the judge of that. Anyways, I wanted this character to be the chair of the Physical Magics Education Department, which of course means he is a coach and he is the dumb jock himbo archetype, which is an archetype that I think is a super fun time. So I arrived in this place for this character design because looking at the actual plant, it's very vibrant and colorful, but the whole idea of the plant is that it's called a bird of paradise because it looks like something that it isn't. It's sort of like a facade plant, a plant pretending to be something that it isn't. So I thought this character would be maybe putting up a front in a similar way, be really loud and comedic and sort of peacocking in order to get attention, and maybe be doing that in order to cover up some kind of insecurity that this character has. So I think the Physical Magics Education Department would be very focused on sort of combat skills, how certain magics can be implemented in combat, but then also just physically strengthening your body in general. I think this department would have a very jockey atmosphere, and this school would definitely have some kind of like magical sports program that this entire department would be obsessed with. So I think the inferiority that this character feels would come from the fact that he's from kind of an affluent, powerful family who's known for having like super strong magical abilities, but his particular magical ability is like not that strong. It's not super notable or super effective. It's kind of just okay. So I think he's kind of constantly plagued by the phrase, those who cannot do teach, and it's something that his family kind of holds over him, that he hasn't really been able to be successful outside of an academic arena with his abilities. So given the jockey nature of this character, I think the ability that his family would have overall is some kind of speed-based teleportation where they can move so quickly that it's basically like teleportation, but it's really just flying super fast, because I wanted to tie birds and wings into the motif of their family. So his teleportation would operate as a micro version of that, where he's pretty good at teleporting and he's pretty fast, but he can only teleport to distances within eyeshot. So if he can't see the location, he can't move to it, as opposed to his family where they can kind of think of a place, even if it's across, you know, the continent, and just instantly teleport to there. So his particular brand of teleportation is something that would only be valid within like a low-level athletic situation. Like, it's so weak that sports allow it, and it might even be something that he could teach to others and they can develop over time. So while his ability is decently remarkable to other people who might not know teleportation, it's completely unremarkable within his family and lineage who's really good at this. So unfortunately, I think a lot of his personality comes from overcompensating for all of the ways that his family has mistreated him. So he puts out like a lot of loud, confident energy. He's a huge jokester and always looking for laughs. And I also think that he doesn't take magic in general too seriously and even resents it to a certain extent. Like, he's very much focused on natural athletics and natural strength over what he can get from magic, because unfortunately he's just not very adept at it. I think outwardly he projects the attitude that he finds the political magical dynamics within the school to be very silly and just wants to get along with all the faculty and everyone to take all that stuff less seriously. And of course, a lot of that actually comes from the fact that he just doesn't really want to deal with magic, because he feels snubbed by magic since he wasn't gifted in that particular way. But I think the fact that he wasn't gifted does make him particularly compassionate to other kids in the school that aren't particularly magically gifted, but still working really hard from like an academic standpoint to study and get good at things like potions and charms and curses and things that they can control and get good at that aren't just innate abilities. I think his dynamic within the school is very much like students love him, faculty tolerates him. In terms of his dynamics with the other characters, I think he gets along well enough with Wisteria and Fuchsia. I think he gets along with Fuchsia in particular because they're both kind of fashion and they have that shared interest. I think things are a little bit more tense with Wisteria because I feel like these two had a little thing in the past, maybe like a little fling or something, and now they're keeping it professional, but Bird doesn't make that easy. I'm calling this character Bird, by the way. This fling would have definitely been at the height of faculty gossip, and Wisteria would definitely be like, oh my gosh, what did I do? What's wrong with me? Now everyone's talking about this. It's definitely like campus tea for a little bit. As you could probably guess, I don't think that Bird and Spectre would get along well at all, mostly from Spectre's perspective, because I think that Bird would constantly be joking with him and messing with him, but in like a fun, casual way. He doesn't mean harm. He just, enjoys getting a little bit of a rise out of Spectre because he's a little uptight, but Bird doesn't take it too seriously. Spectre, on the other hand, takes it very, very seriously and might even be like trying to get Bird fired from time to time. I think that would be some fun little drama to be had. I think the faculty at the school would just be tragically dysfunctional and really fun to watch in a mockumentary style sitcom. You know what I mean? In terms of the design itself, I had a super fun time working on Bird, and I loved how the little colored thumbnail that I did turned out, but whenever I got into actually painting him and doing the character design, I definitely struggled a little bit. and it's a little overwhelming. I'm very new to like a rainbow color palette, but let me at least explain what I was going for. So as a bird of paradise, I feel like his family is known for being very flashy and colorful and beautiful in like an amazing jaw-dropping way. And as a family member who's maybe not exactly a model example of this clan, I feel like his overall appearance is just a little lacking. Like, he doesn't have all of the traits that his family has, so instead he tries to kind of emulate them through natural means. I think first of all, the wings of his family are probably very, very large and bright and colorful, and they look a little bit more like bird wings than fairy wings. And while his wings are very large and beautiful, they sort of have just an orange color to them, and they lack that spectacular multicolored effect that his family is known for, so I think he overcompensates for that in other ways. So the first way I'm thinking is his hair. I think that's something else that he's sort of lacking in. Like, he might have some kind of coloration to his hair, but it's overall dull in comparison to his family. I think they're probably known for having like vibrant, colorful, long heads of hair. So since he doesn't have that coloration naturally in his wings or his hair, I think maybe he dyes it. I think overall his aesthetic is a little bit more rebellious or alternative. That's the other reason why I gave him shaved sides, to play into that alt aesthetic, and also so that you can see his natural hair color kind of growing in. It's also styled in kind of a mohawk because first of all, I feel like that's very bird, and second of all, maybe he's compensating for a lack of volume that his family has in their hair that he doesn't have. For the outfit itself, I wanted to put him in something that feels kind of sporty and also something that he could maybe like fight in or go to war in. So the overall outfit has like a lot of wing and feather shapes to it, and it sort of has that shoulder pauldron shape, but all of it I feel like is something that's still relatively easy to move around in. He's got his little feathery waist piece, but with biker shorts underneath, so you could theoretically run fast if you have to. He's got some fancy yet sensible boots, and then coming off of his pauldrons, he's got drapey little bat sleeves, but in a way where they trail behind his arms. It's not going to inhibit his movement. And then of course he's got the little compression sleeves on because first of all, it looks very sport, and second of all, I have a compulsion where I just give these to all my characters and I will not be explaining myself further. Finally, a huge aspect of his design are the cyan tattoos all over his exposed chest, and I feel like the reason for this is, first of all, he's a show-off, so if he can get away with having an exposed chest, of course he will. But second of all, I feel like these are spell-based tattoos that help to enhance his ability. He's all for taking advantage of the more grounded ways of using magic to enhance the innate abilities that you do have, so this is probably something that he does in order to get a little bit faster and just a little bit closer to the teleportation ideals that his family has. I think the exposure of the tattoos as another like way to legitimize it within my design is like a transparency within the world of sports. Like if you're using any kind of spells to enhance your performance, you have to be transparent about it and they have to be like visible on your person or something like that. Anyways, that was once again a very long ramble, but those are my ideas about Bird, and his design needs some work. I gotta iron out some kinks with the colors, but I love him. Finally, to wrap things up, like I did in my little Valentine's Day video, I made a couple of alignment charts so that you can see how well these characters get along within their dynamic and sort of what their likes are and what areas they fall into whenever it comes to some of the world's most pressing issues. These charts are very stupid, but I think they're also a lot of fun, and they can like give you a little bit more of the vibe that I'm going for with these characters and how they would relate to one another. And with that, here are all the finished designs from this video. This was definitely more of a rambly one. We definitely were not nearly as concise with the designs this week as I wanted to, but I also think that it is necessary to show my struggles in a design video like this, because sometimes it goes well, everything comes together, and sometimes it doesn't. And as I'm sitting down to record these, I think of good ideas that I should have done, ways to improve the characters. So I don't know about you, but I think it's sometimes just as fun to discuss the direction that a character could have gone in and might go in the future, as it is to discuss an actually good, well thought out character design. You agree, right? All jokes aside, I hope you guys enjoyed the place that we arrived at today. You know, sometimes art block is art block, and it will keep you from doing exactly what you want to do, but I still tried my best to make some good designs for you guys this week, and, you know, expand this weird, sprawling universe that we have going. As always, feel free to speculate wildly and come up with your own little fan fictions in the comments below. Some of you are much better at doing that than I am, because you guys are writers and I am not. And let me know if you would like me to return to this weird little fairy school in the future. School arc is not something that I typically gravitate towards in my character designs and stories, but the fact that it ties into some characters that I already have, I think makes it kind of fun, and it might be interesting to return to this in the future and like interweave those stories a little bit more. So let me know if that's something you would want to see. As always, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do, I make a lot of videos like this, so you should probably, like, I don't know, subscribe and turn on notifications and like the video so that you can see more of this beautiful content that I produce for you. But the biggest thank you for this video and for every single one of my videos goes to my magical, ethereal patrons, and especially my executive producers. If you would like to become magical and ethereal yourself and join their ranks, you can do so by heading to patreon.com/PricklyAlpaca and signing up for as low as $1 a month. A huge thank you goes to Infinity131, Faith, Mossy Raven, Dirt, I'm not saying that name on the internet, ABW Makes, Sarah, Crimson Moon 04, Awendu, Liana, Ermler Jean, Anubix, Breeza, Sony, Brian, Phoenix, Rose Draconi, Ira, Freedom and Gus Gus, Kat, Dodo, Zyle S, Agent.Sketchy, Thea Maia, Lovisa, Eloquent Silence, Megan Penland, Enozine, India Gloom, Hypnos, Katie, Sweet Winter Garden, Gravity Drop, I Hang Out with Cats at Parties, and of course, Bean the Bread.